Hello, my name is Larry Falbe, and I'm an attorney with Miller Canfield in Chicago, Illinois. Thanks for taking a look at this video, which is entitled Surviving and Thriving Through Environmental Inspections. I hope you find it helpful and informative. First, a few words about me and my law firm. I've been practicing environmental and regulatory law for over 20 years, having graduated from DePaul University College of Law in Chicago. Miller Canfield is an international law firm with over 275 lawyers and paralegals spread across 13 offices in the U.S. and internationally, including China, Mexico, Poland, and Canada. Founded in 1852 in Detroit, Michigan, Miller Canfield is a full-service law firm offering legal and business advice and services in many different industries, including particularly the automotive industry. We have a substantial Chicago office from which we serve clients in Illinois and all over the world. Today, we're going to discuss environmental inspections. We have several goals for today. First, to understand why inspections occur. Second, to know how to properly handle an inspection. Third, to know what not to do. Fourth, what happens after an inspection. And last, some best practices to help prepare your team or facility for the inspection. So a natural question is, why are we getting inspected? There are several different reasons for prompting an inspection, the most important of which is probably the periodic compliance check. Periodic compliance checks are performed by EPA, OSHA, and other regulatory agencies on a quarterly, annually, or biannual basis for each facility. However, another very important reason for getting inspected is an employee complaint, also known as a whistleblower. An inspection can also be a follow-up to a prior inspection, generally to check to see if corrective action has been properly implemented and performed. There could be a change in ownership of the business or an expansion of the facility, which would prompt an inspection. And finally, if it's a totally new facility or if there's a change in ownership of the facility, those are also important reasons for prompting an inspection. So who may perform an inspection? There are different agencies and all have different jurisdictions, although there's a substantial amount of overlap among these various agencies. I won't go through each one of these, but probably the primary ones are the US EPA and state EPAs. You could also, however, have local agencies such as the local publicly owned treatment works, the local fire department, or municipal officials. A very common question is whether or not the facility owners must allow the inspection. Typically, authority is given to federal or state agencies under specific environmental, labor, or other laws or regulations. Also, specific permits may provide for inspections within the language of the permit, and search warrants or other specific judicial authority can be had in extreme cases. Another common question is whether or not we can refuse entry to the inspectors. Refusing entry is almost never a good idea. Typically, it's seen as a sign that there is something to hide at the facility. This often causes more problems down the road, and it may be a violation of law, your permit, or properly issued authority. And you can bet if you refuse entry to an inspector, they will be back, and they will be back with probably more inspectors, and they will be a bit more specific and probably less lenient about what they will allow. So what happens first during an environmental or other regulatory inspection? The first thing that happens is the arrival and announcement of the inspectors. The inspectors will come to a facility and announce themselves and show their credentials. You should check these credentials, and it's not a bad idea to call the office that the inspectors are coming from, whether it's US EPA, a state agency, or OSHA, and check to make sure that the credentials and the inspectors are legitimate. You need to ask the purpose of the inspection. Typically, there will be a specific purpose the inspectors are coming for, and you should ask what that is. That will also help you determine the scope of the inspection. When the inspectors arrive, you need to notify your facility internal response team. That could include an on-site team, it could also include a corporate governance team, and it may in turn include internal or external legal counsel. Once all the preliminaries are accomplished, you should convene a pre-inspection conference with the inspectors and your internal response team. The pre-inspection conference is a very important part of the entire inspection experience. Typically, the inspectors and the facility personnel will meet in a conference room. At that point, you should ask for the detailed purpose and scope of inspection. You should request a citation to the specific authority that the inspectors are relying on. After that, you can identify and introduce the individuals on your response team. And then it's a good idea to have a conversation with the inspectors and lay out the ground rules of the inspection. For example, what areas of the plant will be inspected? You may have concerns of confidentiality or HIPAA, which is a medical confidentiality statute, for photographs, video, things like that. You should establish if the inspectors wish to discuss anything with the employees, and if they're going to have requests for documents and testing or sampling. It's a good idea to provide a facility diagram if you have one available and actually walk through the diagram, explain the areas of operation if the inspectors are not familiar with your facility, and establish where in the facility the inspectors wish to go. Finally, you should give your standard safety briefing depending on the kind of facility you have and any dangers or hazards in your facility, and also issue PPE or personal protective equipment if that's appropriate. As far as conducting the inspection, the facility personnel should escort the inspectors at all times. The last thing you want to do is have an inspector have free rein over your facility. You should take factual, non-conclusory notes. In other words, take good notes about what the inspectors ask and what the responses are given, but don't put any conclusions in your notes because those notes may be discoverable during an enforcement action later. If the inspectors take photographs, you are perfectly entitled to take your own photographs and/or request copies of the photographs from the inspectors. You should keep records of any requested documents and any documents that are provided to the inspectors. Most importantly, answer the questions directly based on the facts. No guessing. You're not required to speculate if you don't have the information at hand, and it's always a good idea to tell an inspector, if you don't have the information at hand, we will get back to you later and provide that information. It also gives you a chance to reflect on the question, make sure if there's any follow-ups or any additional information you wish to give, that can be provided at that time along with the documents. Most importantly of all, tell the truth. There's nothing worth lying about in terms of an environmental inspection. And as we always say, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. An important part of the environmental inspection is the document or record inspection and review. Inspectors may ask for and generally have a right to copies of relevant records. These can be in paper or electronic form. They can include training logs, certifications or other records, safety data sheets or SDSs, formerly known as MSDSs, things like permits for air, water discharges, tank registrations, an EPA ID number for generation of hazardous waste, waste manifests themselves, chemical or hazardous material inventories, or other operational records. Also, very commonly, inspectors will ask for plans, policies, and procedures. A hazardous waste management plan, a HAZCOM or hazardous communication program, a SPCC plan, and standard operating procedures for tank fueling are all very common plans that you should have at your facility and which inspectors generally ask for. Just as we had a pre-inspection opening conference, you ought to have a post-inspection closing conference. Generally, you reconvene in the conference room. At that time, the inspectors will summarize the findings of the inspection. They will identify violations, and if they don't identify any violations, you should ask them directly, have you noticed any violations at the facility? At that time, the inspectors will also spell out any corrective action that needs to be taken. They may put together a set of notes or an inspector's report on a form. They may ask you to sign the report, and it's okay to sign it if the signature is only an acknowledgement that you've seen a copy of the report. At that time, you should also discuss the next steps with the inspectors. For example, will a notice of violation or NOV be issued? Will there be a follow-up inspection report that you will receive? Again, is corrective action being requested? And so on and so on. Internally, after the inspection has occurred, you need to follow up with your facility and corporate management. You should discuss the results of the inspection with legal counsel and predict if there's going to be enforcement action. And probably most importantly, note the lessons learned and what opportunities for improvement you have at your facility and the compliance of it. So the best practices for preparing for an environmental or other regulatory inspection are as follows. Ask for or generate a written inspection checklist or guidance. Identify specific individuals for the response team with backups. Practice responding to an inspection. Refresh the plan often, especially when employees may come and go from the facility and the company. Prepare your employees, not just the managers, for these inspections. Know where your documents and records are. Make compliance an everyday priority. Practice good housekeeping, proper records management and reporting, training, etc. Understand your operations and wastes, whether they are hazardous wastes, universal waste, electronic waste or e-waste, etc. You may also consider proactive environmental compliance audits, which I talk about in another one of my videos. And most importantly, ask for help. Talk to outside consultants, talk to environmental attorneys, whether they're in-house or outside, and also people in your industry for best management practices, including an IMA. So a few frequently asked questions. Will I get notice of the inspection? The answer is generally not. Most inspections occur as a surprise, and of course that's because inspectors don't want to give prior notice so they can see the facility in its natural state of compliance. However, there are some inspections that occur on an annual basis where the inspectors will give you a heads up, and that's primarily so that you can be prepared and have all the documentation and the answers ready when the inspectors arrive. However, do not rely on getting advance notice of an inspection because oftentimes they are surprises. Another frequently asked question is, can the inspectors talk to our employees? The answer is generally yes. Inspectors have a right to talk to your employees. You typically have a right to be present. You may provide them with legal counsel, but it's also very dangerous to refuse to have an inspector talk to an employee if for no other reason than they think you're trying to hide something. Can inspectors confiscate computers and records? The answer to that is it depends. Typically, under many permits and environmental laws, inspectors have a right to look at documents and to ask for copies of them. They typically, unless a search warrant is involved, don't have a right to carry away computers or your only copies of records. Can inspectors look at my notes? The answer to that is typically no. However, they may be able to get hold of your notes later if an enforcement action occurs or there's other legal action involved. Therefore, it's very important, once again, to take good, factually oriented notes that don't have any conclusions in them. And then finally, should I admit violations? The answer to that is typically no. I would keep it factual and the inspectors will make their own determination. I think it's very fair and proper to ask the inspectors what they think the violations are and what corrective action they are requesting. But rather than admit a violation on the spot, it's typically better to take time to consult with your internal and external consultants and legal counsel before you admit whether there was actually a violation that could cause you to incur penalties. That's the end of my presentation. My contact information is on the slide. I hope you enjoyed it, and I thank you very much for your attention.